So he's gone.
The MCU keeps expanding, and while I don't see things slowing down anytime soon when it comes to character introduction,
no more slingshots, no more destruction. We need to clean this mess up and go home.
I'm also very curious about the heroes and villains that we won't see. I mean, some characters are too weird, too problematic, or just don't fit within the MCU and the stories it wants to tell. So today's video is all about those guys that we'll probably never see in live action.
You're in the right place. Thank you for that.
Bummer. I'm talking Red Hulk, Mephisto, Sentry, Squirrel Girl, and a whole lot more. Let's get started right now.
They lived happily ever after. Wait, what?
Huh?
Alright, there will be a few Hulk-centric characters on this list because I just don't think we'll see a lot of Hulk focus going forward. The prime Hulk years have seen the character reduced to a side character thanks to rights issues. And even though She-Hulk seems to be setting up a Planet Hulk-esque storyline with possibly Hulk's son involved, I just don't see the MCU focusing on a lot of Hulk stories in the coming years. Which is a real shame because we're missing out on some wonderful characters, like Maestro. I've always felt Maestro was the solution to the MCU's Hulk problem. In the comics, there was often a sense that Hulk was this uncontrollable monster who could snap at any moment. But after the first Avengers movie, that idea that Hulk could go berserk has kind of gone out the window. Now he's all goofy and we're not even sure if the Hulk personality is coming back. So I thought Maestro could have been a way to introduce the rampaging, dangerous version of Hulk without it causing serious damage to our Hulk's reputation. In the comics, Maestro is an alternate version of Hulk from the future who has survived a nuclear holocaust and came out of it even stronger. He also possesses Banner's intellect, so he's the best of both worlds. Especially with the multiverse, I thought we could visit a universe where Maestro reigns supreme, forcing Smart Hulk to either tap into his Hulk personality once again, or serve as a cautionary tale of what he might become. I also thought it would be cool if Kang recruited evil versions of all the Avengers from different universes, and Maestro was one of them. See, some fun options, but since we're entering more into the era of She-Hulk than regular Hulk, I don't see them going this route. I mean, Mark Ruffalo probably doesn't want to do this forever, right? Or does he? I never know with that guy. Sentry is the superhero name for Robert Reynolds, and he's one of the strongest heroes in the Marvel Universe. But there's something really interesting about him. As long as he's around, the evil darkness, the Void, who's just as strong as he is also around, creating a struggle where he's a fantastic hero, but also the cause for a lot of suffering. Overall, he's a really cool character, and he's one of the biggest exclusions from the MCU. But at this stage, is it too late to introduce him? I think it might be, and there are some reasons for that. The first is his backstory. The way Robert Reynolds gets his powers is that he's a meth addict who breaks into a lab and takes the Golden Sentry Serum, which is an offshoot of the Super Soldier Serum that made Captain America. So there's a lot of red flags right there. First of all, I don't think the MCU will ever have a meth addict as a backstory for one of their heroes. If they sidestepped Tony Stark's alcoholism, then there's no way they're touching Sentry's original backstory. On top of that, at this stage, can you really tell an interesting Super Soldier Serum gone wrong storyline? Haven't we mined that enough in Falcon and the Winter Soldier? So keeping both of those elements in mind, I don't think they can bring the Sentry to life without drastically changing his backstory. And even if they do that, would we really want to see a version of Superman in the MCU? I mean, we kind of already did with Icarus, and the MCU got rid of him pretty quickly. You think they would introduce another character with his almost exact skill set so soon? Sorry, Sentry, much like your backstory, I think the MCU has forgotten about you permanently. Another Hulk character, but this one has a much sadder reason why we probably won't see him. Red Hulk is one of Hulk's greatest villains. Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross has been a long-time enemy of Bruce Banner and his alter ego, and Ross's obsession eventually led him to becoming a Hulk himself. Thunderbolt Ross was one of the earliest MCU characters who kept popping up in later movies, and what they were doing with him was interesting and seemed to suggest they had bigger plans for him. They de-aged the character for Black Widow, which, yeah, could have just been a simple explanation of them having him look like he did in Civil War, but also, he didn't look that much different, right? Like, would anyone have cared cared if he looked just a little older in Black Widow than he did in Endgame? Sure, maybe my memory is foggy and he looked drastically older, but my crazy theory is that they de-aged William Hurt as practice for when they could turn him into Red Hulk down the line. But of course, tragedy happened when Hurt passed away recently. And yes, the MCU could recast the character, but he's also not a vital MCU character where they need to do that. They could easily have the character pass away in the MCU to match real life, and then we never get Red Hulk. That's understandable, but a little disappointing. The only glimmer of hope that we might get this character is the upcoming Thunderbolts movie. Here's my thing about that. Why call it Thunderbolts? None of the characters they've officially announced, meaning Yelena, Red Guardian, Bucky Barnes, US Agent, Ghost, Taskmaster, and Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, are traditionally on the Thunderbolts team. And in the real world, wouldn't your movie be more marketable if you called it the Dark Avengers? So the Thunderbolts has to be an important name for a reason. And in the comics, one iteration of the team is called that because of Thunderbolt Ross, who both leads and serves on the team as Red Hulk. So what do you think? Should they recast Thunderbolt Ross in the MCU to give us Red Hulk? Or is it more respectful to just retire the character permanently? Alright, at this stage, it would be sort of hilarious and the ultimate troll move if the MCU never introduces Mephisto, right? I mean, how can they at this point? Expectations were set so high at the start of Phase 4, with everyone thinking he was going to show up in WandaVision, then people thinking he could show up in Loki, then the Spider-Man No Way Home film not only having a plot that in the comics featured Mephisto, but it also had a trailer that had a huge hint to Mephisto, to the point that people were speculating that Doctor Strange was Mephisto in disguise. So after all that, I wonder if the MCU has backed themselves into a corner a bit with the character. Any introduction now may not live up to the hype set by the start of Phase 4. The MCU might just want to always tease the character, but never introduce him, just to continue stoking the fires. I mean, is there a good place for him to show up? Anything with Doctor Strange would be a safe bet, but the former Sorcerer Supreme's next movie seems to be centered around Clea and a trip back to the Dark Dimension. So does that leave room for Marvel's Devil? I don't know. Alright, this one is a bit of a cheat, but also different enough where I don't mind putting them on this list. In the Secret Empire storyline, it was revealed that Captain America was Hydra all along. Well, not really. The Tesseract had rewritten reality to turn Steve Rogers evil, and it created a really compelling villain in Hydra Captain America. Now, with Chris Evans hanging up his shield and old Steve Rogers on the moon or something for the rest of his life, we'll never get the Secret Empire arc, and that's a real shame. An evil Steve Rogers might be a great villain for Sam Wilson to fight in a future movie, but there doesn't seem a way to do that now that Chris Evans has moved on from the role. And let's be honest, Chris Evans would kill it as evil Captain America. Yes, in the MCU, Evans was great embodying a morally upstanding hero, but since his time as a hero, it seems like Evans has relished in playing sinister characters. So this wouldn't have been outside the realm of possibility. So here's a question in line with my Red Hulk question. Do you think it's worth having an evil Steve Rogers from a different universe if it's not Chris Evans playing him? I don't know. Remember when we were in the theater for No Way Home and the post-credit scene was a teaser for Multiverse of Madness, which seemed to confirm Shuma-Gorath, and we were all excited? But then remember when they gave us a character that looked exactly like Shuma-Gorath, but couldn't call him that because Marvel doesn't own the rights to the name? Yeah, I think that means we'll never get to Shuma-Gorath in the MCU, especially since they gave us a vague version of the character in What If, but also didn't call him by his name. Couple that with the Multiverse of Madness monster, and that means that even if Marvel did acquire the rights to the name later on, they already spoiled the design on something else. So although Shuma-Gorath is an all-powerful, multiversal being that rivals any huge Marvel threat, he probably will never make the jump to live action properly. What's bittersweet about Squirrel Girl is that we almost had her in the MCU. Before Disney Plus became the exclusive home to all new Marvel shows, the MCU was branching out and trying all different types of Marvel shows on different streaming services like Hulu. Hulu had a new Warriors project in development that never moved past the pilot phase, but it did star Mulana Weintraub of AT&T commercial fame as Squirrel Girl, which feels like perfect casting. But since that project was scrapped, it's hard to to imagine if there's a place for Squirrel Girl in the MCU. It's not like she fits in Moon Knight or Eternals or anything, right? The only place that would be fitting for her would probably be She-Hulk, but I think now that's a long shot. And that's unfortunate because Squirrel Girl opens up a much quirkier side of the MCU, and now I don't think we're seeing that. Yeah, I've given up on Beta Ray Bill at this point. I think the time to introduce the Corbinite has long passed. They've already altered the story of his Stormbreaker weapon, and they went through the whole someone else's worthy of Mjolnir arc with Jane in Love and Thunder. You know what? I really think Korg's character should have been replaced with Beta Ray Bill. We got the hint that Beta Ray Bill was a gladiator on Sakaar in Ragnarok, so that would have made sense. And the overexposure of Korg in Love and Thunder convinced me that the movie would have been better if Beta Ray Bill filled that spot instead. But now, I don't know. Yes, it said in the end credits title cards that Thor will return, but will he get another solo movie? Reception of Love and Thunder wasn't stellar like Ragnarok, so it's unclear if Taika Waititi would be back for another one. And with Avengers The Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars being big enough films that could serve as the logical endpoint for Thor's character, it makes you wonder if Beta Ray Bill will show up at all. Okay, one more Hulk character, and I'll keep this one short and sweet. In the comics, Amadeus Cho is the 7th smartest man on Earth, and he does become the Hulk after Bruce Banner. And while that's great in the comics, is there really room for him in the MCU? Think about it, we just got She-Hulk in the MCU, so I imagine it's going to take a while before they give us another Hulk in order to give She-Hulk time to breathe and grow a bit. And we're about to get the introduction of 2 of the smartest minds on the planet with Reed Richards and Dr. Doom. So there's not really a place for another super smart guy known for being smart, right? It would be weird if they introduced Reed Richards as this incredibly smart dude who's miles smarter than anyone else, but then immediately introduce another hero who's also a genius. At least, that's my thinking. Alright, let's get weird for 1 second. Did you know that Doc Savage is one of the forerunners for modern superheroes? It's true. Stan Lee himself credited the 1930s hero as the foundation for future superheroes. It's also kind of funny that his Wikipedia page starts off with the sentence, Doc Savage is a fictional character of the competent man hero type. Yep, I would definitely call him competent, and he does have a history of being published by Marvel Comics, so it counts. But although he is such an important figure in comics, he'll never be in the MCU. There's just no way to make that work. And yes, it's not really a huge loss since he's only minimally connected to Marvel Comics, but still the MCU is choosing to explore the past a bit more recently, and seeing another movie set in the 1930s or 40s in Steve Rogers' old time period would be a lot of fun. It won't happen, but it would be fun. The fact that the MCU altered Thanos' backstory and motivation to pivot him away from being in love with Death was probably the smarter move, but it does mean we now miss out on Death as a character. And I think there's an alternate universe out there where the MCU used the Asgardian goddess of death Hela as a death stand-in and made Thanos in love with her. That would have added an entirely new spin to the MCU. But given that they amped up the death aspect of Hela's character in Ragnarok and changed Thanos' main goals, I think that means we'll never see Death in the MCU. I mean, yeah, we'll see characters die and we'll see Death, but not the character of Death. You know what I mean. So The Marvels is a movie that's coming out soon, and it focuses on Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, and Spectrum, who was Captain Marvel before becoming Spectrum in the comics. That's a lot of Marvels, and it makes me think because of that, we'll never see Blue Marvel in the MCU. Blue Marvel is one of those incredibly strong heroes that you just don't hear about enough. He's not only strong enough to lift 100 tons with ease, but can also produce stable antimatter, one of the most powerful substances, or whatever you want to call antimatter, in the universe. Given that in the comics his backstory is related to the Negative Zone, which I think would be reserved for the Fantastic Four in the MCU, and that he has a similar story to Isaiah Bradley from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I just don't think we're going to get this character in this franchise. Because of the relationship with DC Comics, I don't think we're getting any Superman-esque characters in the MCU. Again, like I mentioned before, they already had Icarus and they got rid of him quickly, which makes me think we'll avoid Superman-inspired characters in the MCU going forward, and that means no Hyperion. Hyperion is clearly a Superman homage, coming from a universe where he was the sole survivor of a race of Eternals, sent to Earth as a baby, and was raised by a kind family who instilled in him truth, justice, and all that jazz. Yeah, too close to Superman that I don't think the MCU will bother with Hyperion. Daredevil is back, and we know he's going to be facing Kingpin, but there have to be other villains in the 18-episode series, right? So just who would that consist of? I can tell you right now that he's not going to be fighting Stiltman. Yeah, Daredevil does have a villain who can extend his legs to insane heights to commit crime. I mean, the Netflix shows were super dark and gritty, so there's no way the character would fit there, but I would also guess good money that Stiltman is also too goofy for the reboot show, even if it is on Disney+. Okay, last but not least, we're certainly not going to get any DC characters in the MCU. Comics have a long history of insane crossovers, leading to things like Superman holding Captain America's shield and wielding Mjolnir. Yeah, as cool as it would be to one day get a project of DC characters interacting with Marvel characters, that just won't happen on the big screen. Sure, the actors can jump franchises though, like Michael Keaton can be Batman and also play the Vulture, but those characters will never get the chance to meet each other. Probably for the best. But one last question. Do you think if DC ever gets their cinematic universe expanded that it could lead to an epic DC versus MCU crossover in like 20 years? At that point, who would win? You know, if it wasn't for the Werewolf by Night trailer, I totally would have said Man-Thing as a character we'd probably never see in the MCU. But nope, there he is in all his Man-Thing glory. What characters on this list do you think have the chance to pop up? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching CBR.